And this is another adventure for us. Today we have new authors that you probably have not met before if you've attended the other series. I know you haven't met them before. But anyway, this is one of my favorite ones because this is all about the inspiration. I really feel that if you know the inspiration behind why a book was written, as you read that book, you have a connection with the author and you have a connection with the book, and it means more to you. And it also inspires you to write that book that you've been thinking about writing anyway. You just need to help somebody get you there. So we have four great authors today. I'm going to start out by asking for their inspiration. They'll give that for about 5 minutes. And then we're going to come back to them and they're going to give you the benefit to you should you buy their book and read their book and what you can get out of it and how you can succeed with it. First of all, I'm going to start with Stefanie Austin.
Hi,
and
how are you doing?
Her book, yes, her book is My Will or His Will, Learning to Live a Life to Surrender. And I think that title is really great. I didn't think of it that way before. A life to surrender. That's really interesting. Mm-hmm. And it's something we all need to think about doing. Stefanie has worked in healthcare for over 20 years. She's an accomplished author of 2 published bestseller series books. She's in the process of writing the final series to My Will or His Will. Stefanie.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. So as Gloria mentioned, my name is Stefanie Austin. And what I'm going to share with you today is why did I write this book, And here, the reason why, or how was I inspired? And I was inspired to write, to start sending out text messages to friends and myself as I was going through great experiences in life, as well as challenging experiences in life. And as I went through those different experiences, I would open up the Word of God, my Bible, and then there would be different scriptures that will be applicable to those different experiences. Different people will contact me and ask me to pray for them because they knew I would pray, and just to, either to vent and share what's going on in their life in a positive way, as well as things that were challenging for them. And so I would start out sending text messages to different friends and family members. And it would start out with from 1 person to 5 to 10 to 15, 20, then 100. And what I found out is that other people were sharing and forwarding my text to other people. And for years, people would say, Stefanie, you send all these wonderful messages. How did you know that was applicable? How did you know I was going through this at this time? And I would say, girl or man, I didn't know. Actually, I was going through this at this particular time, or a friend was going through it, and God just placed that upon my heart. And they kept saying, you have a book, you need to write a devotional. And I'm like, no, this is just something that's going on with me, or I'm sharing, and this is just the place, this is good enough for me. And so I started really, really praying more and just being intentional and fasting and praying. And God said to me, you need to write a devotional. And I'm like, I was struggling and battling. I didn't want to surrender to God's guidance and direction. And thus, when I finally did surrender, also note, I didn't have a title because I was being disobedient. And when I finally surrendered, God gave me the title, My Will or His Will. I said, you have a sense of humor, right? Because you're going to give me this title because I was struggling against my own will and His will. And then He gave me the subtitle, Living a Life to Surrender. So learning how to surrender. That's how My Will or His Will series begun. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce the next author, and that's Luiza Dreasher. Her book, Mastering Cultural Differences, Strategies for Leading a Global Workplace. Luiza is a diversity, equity, inclusion facilitator, speaker, and author. As president and CEO of Mastering Cultural Differences, she serves as a trainer and consultant for organizations that want team members to understand cultural differences and work well across those differences. As a contributing writer, her writings focus on transformative solutions for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Her new book, Mastering Cultural Differences, Strategies for Leading a Global Workplace, provides incredible insight into differences impacting today's culturally diverse workplaces and identifies best practices for increased performance in a global economy. And having come to the United States from Brazil, I think she does a little walker talk. So at this time, Luiza.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Hello, everyone. Welcome to all of you. I would say, what inspired me to write this book? I think there are two reasons. One was my journey, and the other one is my passion. By now, you can detect my accent. I used to say this is my Minnesota nice accent, but it's not. This accent comes to you via Brazil, where I was born and raised, but then I came to the United States to pursue my graduate studies. In fact, when I used to work in study abroad, I would often joke that mine is the longest study abroad on record because I came in to study and never left. Looking back on my journey, I think I've had a very privileged professional experience. I've had, throughout my positions, I've had, international experiences. My job has led me to the Ukraine, to Japan, to Spain, to Puerto Rico. I've also worked with a lot of internationals, women scientists and scholars from all over the world. That's why I think of myself as Brazilian by birth, but multicultural by choice. Going back, when I first arrived in the United States, I think I committed the number one sin of those crossing cultures, which was I assumed that if I behaved the same way I behaved in Brazil, all would be fine. And nothing could be further from the truth. What I did not realize was that every culture has its own rule book. And this rule book tells us how to behave, what is appropriate, what is not, our values, our beliefs, what we eat for breakfast, how we greet people, how far we stand from each other, how we view and use time. In fact, speaking of time, when I first arrived, one of the biggest mistakes I made was I kept missing the bus. I was always late my first week of class. And my friends at the university would tell me, Luiza, just look at the schedule. It's very easy. Just look and show up at the right time. And sure enough, there was a beautiful, very detailed schedule. But the problem was that it said, I would see 9:02, 10:17, 12:03, and I could not wrap my mind around such a precision, because Brazilians have a very flexible, very relaxed way of, view of time. Well, I did learn to show up in time most of the time. It wasn't until later that my passion for understanding cultural differences that kept pushing me to do research, to teach, to write. And that was when I fully grasped the idea that cultural differences matter. And to avoid misunderstandings in our cross-cultural interactions, we need to take culture into consideration. And that's why I wrote my book. In the book, it's full of disastrous situations that happened because businesses did not take culture into consideration, as well as how cultural differences are impacting the workplace these days.
It sounds like we're probably going to identify with all different parts of your book, for sure, based on what you've just shared with us, especially those who have had a lot of international experiences. So sounds like a great book. The next author that we're going to talk to is Christelle Damiens, and her book The 4 Steps to Generate Your First Million Euros in Sales, The Proven Methodology to Scale Your Business in Europe. Christelle Damiens is a second-time author, as well as a speaker. She's also the director of Exportia, which provides an outsourced European sales and marketing team to EU businesses. The 4 Steps to Generate Your First Million Euros in Sales, her second book, won the Best Australian Business Book Award in 2020 in Sales and Communications category. She is now in the process of writing her third book, and guess what? She's here from Australia. Christelle.
Against all odds, talking about Europe, calling you from Sydney. Thanks for having me. And this is a very nice book writers, book lovers community. So feels really like home. So you wanted me to share my inspiration for the books. So for me, because I've been working with small and medium-sized businesses and helping them to sell their product, their software, the machine in the European market, and I'm very passionate about that, this is an endless source of inspiration. All those experiences, learnings, and also a lot of the things that we have to do to support these businesses succeed in Europe. So for me, that's the main inspiration for all the books I write on that topic. The first book, which is called Ready, Take, Go, I just thought, because I was helping this, it was published in 2016, and I was thinking, okay, I'm helping those businesses export to Europe, and when they come to us, they've all made the same mistakes, they've gone through the same errors, and I'm always advising the same things, and I'm taking them always through the same process. So why don't I just offload that and share that to a broader audience in a book? And that's what really, once I had decided that, I just had to make it happen and start writing. And I almost wrote that book in a continuous flow. That was very quick. And I really needed to offload what I had in mind about those experiences and those advice I was giving to these small businesses. But by the time I had finished, even before finishing that second book, I was already thinking, well, if I did that again, I would just go a step further with more detail. I would add that, and I would do that for my next book. And then the idea of the second book was starting to develop. And so in the second book, what really drove my inspiration was because we had developed a very sophisticated, proven methodology that we use with so many businesses, I thought that was also worth sharing. And so that's what inspired me to actually develop, detail, provide tools and simple steps. So that's the 4 steps to generate your first €1 million in sales. And I just laid a methodology out in that book for everyone to use. And that was the main inspiration for it. And now that I've done 2 how-to books, I'm like, well, especially the second one is very detailed. So I didn't think it was right to do another one. So I thought, well, people learn and differently. Some of them, they want to have the methodology from A to Z. They want to know how to do things. And some people just learn by listening to stories. And so my third book is about sharing stories of international companies from different backgrounds and different nationalities. And it's about their experience going into Europe. So that's the inspiration for the third book.
Thank you. Wow, there's a lot of inspiration right there. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to move on to Susan Shultz and her book, The Board Book, Making Your Corporate Board a Strategic Force in Your Company's Success. Susan F. Shultz is founder and CEO of the Board Institute, which improves boards, and is president of SSA Executive Search International Incorporated, which recruits and structures global boards of directors. Susan authored the Board Book, Making Your Corporate Board a Strategic Force in Your Company's Success, and wrote 3 other best-selling books, including a #1 bestseller. She has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Business Week, US Today, CNN, and major governance media. Susan, please share your inspiration.
Thank you, Gloria. And hello, everyone. It's really delightful to be here. I wanted to start with my first book because it's so unusual. I had been a reporter, and I would pick 8 people to interview each month. And one day I thought it would be fun to interview a fortune teller, which I did, and I found the best fortune teller. And she told me that I was going to write the #1 New York Times bestseller. And I thought, this is absurd. Of course, that's what she's going to say to me. You know, there's no way. I didn't have any plans to write any books. So as it happened, shortly thereafter, I interviewed someone who had a concept called conscious combining. And I wrote for her the Beverly Hills Diet. And if any of you are old enough, maybe you've heard of it. It was really a massive success. And then I wrote the second Beverly Hills Diet book because the publisher and agent wouldn't let anybody else write it. They wanted me to write it, and it was a lot of fun. So as you know, the person with the words is called the writer, and the author is the one with the concept. So on those books, my name is on those books. And actually, conscious combining was really the predecessor to dieting through the type of calories rather than the number of calories. And it's been the foundation for a lot of the most popular diets. And then I wrote How to Adopt the Baby You Want. And I did that because I had written the #1 bestseller, and then you become, very, very visible. So I wrote that for the best adoption lawyer in the country. And that was appealing to me, especially because we had a very famous agent out of London, and we had the #1 editor out of Simon and Schuster, a woman named Alice Mayhew, who has edited many, many famous books. And it was really an honor to work with that team. And then I have been working in corporate governance, as Gloria mentioned. And so I decided it was time to write my own book as the author and the writer. And it was a time when there was not much written about corporate boards and the role of board directors. And it was also a time of tumult in the marketplace with so many abuses and very little oversight by what I call real boards. So many of the boards are passive and afterthought. And this was an opportunity, excuse me, to create the handbook for directors who could understand what their role is, to know what their liabilities were, to understand what their role should be. It was an opportunity for those who work with boards to know how to approach them and how to manage them. And it was an opportunity for people who wanted to serve on boards to learn that path, because it's a very different path than getting a traditional job. And so that's what motivated me. And then it was an opportunity to really elevate the awareness of the critical nature of corporate boards and how they really do become the strategic advantage for success.
Thank you.
I
Well,
should show you my book. I was going to do that.
there we go. Perfect. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, if you don't feel inspired now, I don't know what it will take, because there's a lot of inspiration here and so much goes into as an author writing the book. There's so much heart, soul, passion that goes into it. That being said, I'm going to go back to Stefanie, and I guess the curious, have her share with you a little bit more about what are you going to benefit from? What is maybe some of the biggest takeaways you're going to get from her book series?
So the biggest you're asking me that question?
Yes, I'm asking you what are some of the biggest takeaways the reader's going to get?
I would say the biggest takeaway is having encouragements throughout the day. Many times we're so busy, hustle and bustling, especially women, because we're multitaskers. And sometimes we don't pause just for self-care. I would say My Will or His Will is a self-care book. It's short and succinct, and it targets what you need. And the table of contents, sometimes people look at the table of content and find that one thing that they really want that's on their mind for that day or for that week. And in reading that particular nugget, so I call them spiritual nuggets. When I used to send them out, I said they were spiritual nuggets because it was just enough what you need, just like a little piece of chocolate to satisfy what you need. That spiritual nugget would do that.
I love that. That's perfect. I'm speechless, but I love that feeling. I can't wait I'm definitely going to get your book because I probably need some of those nuggets. I'm sure I do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go over to Luiza. What is some of the biggest takeaways from your book?
The way I wrote the book is each chapter starts with a cultural incident. And to be honest, I had so much fun doing research for, just writing these cultural incidents. One takes place in India. So I found myself, reading the India Times. Another time I was reading, about the golf industry in China because a cultural incident takes place in China. I talk about why Walmart failed in Germany, why Brazilians are always getting in trouble because of their communication style, especially when they are dealing with more direct communicators. So each chapter starts with a cultural incident. Then we move to the theoretical component of the chapter. After I cover that, we revisit the cultural incident, and we end with a lot of tips and practical applications related to the specific cultural orientations. So the book is about the theory, but a theory in a real world context, plus practical applications for the global workplace. And I also take the readers, through a journey. The way I structured the book, because I start with talking about why do we need a different management style these days, given how organizations are becoming increasingly more diverse. Why do we need to learn about cultural differences? What cultural difference? What is culture and specific cultural differences? Why do we need to address biases? Because actually what I found was bias is really what keeps us from bringing diversity in. And in the last chapter, I talk about inclusive leadership. Why do we need, inclusive leadership, and how you can be an inclusive global leader?
It sounds like a workbook within your book.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a pad of paper handy, and we're probably going to totally fill it up. There's a lot of great information, I can tell by just the way you described it. And from that, I'm going to keep things moving along. I'd love to chat a little bit more about your book and the things I picked up from both Stefanie and you so far, but I got to keep it moving. So we'll go over to Christelle, and what are some of the biggest takeaways from your book?
So my second book, The 4 Steps to Generate Your First €1,000,000 in Sales. So it's been published in 2020. So what's interesting is I have a lot of feedback from readers now, and they tell me what is their takeaways. And so what they often say is, because the book is structured around 7 pillars, which are 7 specific themes, that they tend to usually refer back to it. So let's say if they're setting up distribution in Europe, they'll go back to that distributor chapter, the sales channel chapter. And then if they're launching a new product, they'll go back to the product chapter. So there's kind of that reference, so simple methodology that is shared, that is easy to refer back. So that's one of the main takeaways, that it's simple to use as the business goes to the European market. Some of the main things that they tell me as well is that what they found quite useful is, selecting the right country that is right for the business into Europe, not going too many countries at a time is one of their takeaway. The second takeaway that they often mention is how to work with European distributors, not just set them up and wait for them to sell, but how there is a simple way to activate them and get them actively generating revenue for the business. And then the third takeaway is around hiring, which is often where a lot of mistakes happen, hiring too soon. So it's about how to hire, when to hire. And those are some of the main topics that people have judged good takeaways from the book.
I'm curious. Surely your book is in different languages, based on what I'm hearing.
Well, it is because it is for non-European businesses, so typically American businesses, Asian businesses, and APAC businesses going into the European market. At the moment, it is only available in English, but it might change.
I very definitely think it's going to change, definitely. Thank you very much. And now the takeaways from Susan on the board book.
So as I mentioned, I really designed the book as a handbook, and I interviewed well over 100 people for the book, experts all across the board. And it's interesting the access you can get when you're writing a book. And so I really had an opportunity to talk to some remarkable people. And it's a book that talks about how to recruit directors. We developed a matrix system that hadn't been used before, where you look at your strategic future and not look back. So many boards look back and think about what they did and what they need if they do that. Too often, it's friends of friends and people because those are the people you're comfortable with and feel safe with. It talks about family-owned businesses. 65% of our businesses are family-owned, and a board is a wonderful way to validate the business of the business to the family. And also to help the family through transitions with an objective view. I cannot tell you the importance of having independent, objective directors, and especially in family-owned businesses. One of the things I hope everybody will take away is the importance of boards, and that everybody should know about their power. I'd be happy if everybody aspires to sit on a board. So often we are invited to sit on a board and we get in the seat, and then nobody tells us what to do. And people are not going to say, oh, I don't know at that point. So this is a way, tells the questions to ask, the red flags that there might be as you're looking at a board seat, other kinds of considerations as a candidate. It also tells you the steps that you can take to get onto a board. It tells you the organizations that can be helpful to you, provide information. It talks about the vulnerability of directors. I think it's a mistake to believe that you're vulnerable to lawsuits. Every director on a public company almost gets sued, but there's so much protection. It's so rare that a director ever pays out of pocket unless there's direct fraud or criminal action. So there's a lot of basic information. And again, it's a reference book. And I've told a lot of stories, which makes it, I think, interesting. Quoted a lot of very, very interesting people who are so wise and so smart. One woman talks about being treated like a potted palm and how to get around that. But it's just a huge subject, and it was. I think it's valuable for everybody to know about boards, know about the boards of companies you do business with, know about boards of companies you invest in, know about boards, how many women are on boards. I work very hard to promote women on boards because we've been so underrepresented. And I've had an opportunity to talk around the world about women on boards, but there's so many aspects to it. So I can go on, as you can tell, but I think the one takeaway is to have just elevate the awareness of the importance of boards and how you can influence them.
Thank you. I think all of us at some point or another thought of getting on a board. I've served on one board, but it's decades ago. It was the YWCA board, and I had a very short experience with that. And I haven't done it since, and I don't know why. I think I think it's finding the right board. And I don't know if your book does that, but does it help us find the right board based on our background, our expertise, and what we have, where we can make the biggest difference? Curious question.
It does, and I would just say, women especially, we need to ask for the board seat. And that's very hard for us to do in so many cases. But I have a lot of examples of women who have asked and gotten board seats they would never have been considered for.
Gloria, we love the fact that you're on the Global Chamber Phoenix Advisory Board. And this event and this series of events is a great representation of the impact that you've made and that so many other make. So keep up the great work. Thank
you. Well, I've kind of went from speaker view to gallery view now. I don't know if you switch back and forth when you do this, because this is Q&A time. And a way we can do that you see the reactions at the bottom? And if you raise a hand like that, it'll help us see you. If you have a question for one of the authors that you would like to direct, just remember to take it back down when you're done. So at this time, I'd like to open it to the floor, if you will, to the Zoom floor. And if you have a specific question for one of these wonderful authors, please ask it now, because we all want to know anyway. It expands on what we know. Anyone? Okay, Professor. Okay, we have Terry. Terry has the floor.
Thank you.
Hand down?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Take my hand down. How do you take the hand down? I beg your pardon.
Click it again.
Okay, lower it. Got it. Okay, thank you. All of the books sound fabulous. Congratulations on the cultural book. And since I do serve on several boards, I have a question for Susan. I'm interested in your book, particularly because I serve on both higher ed and nonprofit environments. And I wonder if you have any data in there about ensuring that the boards are diverse, because those studies that you see from Price Waterhouse or whomever validate the importance of having a diverse board and how that increases the financial viability of the environment and so forth. But my work right now is more oriented towards nonprofit and higher ed, and I don't see that happening that much.
it's really a shame. First of all, the data is quite wonderful in favor of diversity and the value that brings to an organization of any kind, for profit or not for profit. And that's such a good question. I think, and as you know, a one is not enough. The studies show that you need three to really have a substantial, diverse representation. We're coming to that, and as you probably know, California passed a law that requires 3 people on their public boards now, which for them is a real shock because there was just a tiny percentage of diversity in Silicon Valley. It's slow, and that's the frustration. There's so much lip service. There's so much publicity now. There was none when I wrote my book virtually. And now it's recognized, people understand it, but people do things by instinct and inclination, and they still do it because of comfort. And so we're not there yet. And you're right. And we just, all of us need to work and do whatever we can to encourage any board we're in touch with to diversify. And it's up to all of us who sit on boards to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and for your responses. I know Professor Ancis, you have a question.
Yes, first of all, I want to have an acknowledgement to all of you because while you were talking, all of a sudden I came up with 2 titles of 2 new books that I'm going to be writing. So I want to acknowledge all of you for that. I want to thank Christelle Damiens for sending me her publication that is most fascinating. And one suggestion, in the world of business, as I had been in touch for 40 years, I found out that the first million, actually, believe it or not, is easy to make. What happens is the most challenging portion for companies is how do I move from the 1 million to the 10 million, 5, which is really a field of transformation, organizational transformation. So I'm sure that's going to be one of your new books that I'm going to be buying, and you tell me when, where, and when. And about boards, I just want to make a comment to Susan. I've been on the board, many boards over my life. The biggest frustration that I have as a board vice president, secretary, or just director, is that one of the most important elements to me is being able to make a positive difference on the board. And so many boards are passive boards and not active boards, and also incompetent boards that while I join them with an idea to make a difference, and you are one of 12 who even read the material supposed to, then eventually you move forward. So what's most important in boards for me is the ability to find and select that board that is a proactive board. What is your experience in the case?
Yes, I think that's such a good point, and one of the great frustrations is so many boards really end up being reported to and not engaging in the key issues around a company. And yet the combination, if you have a good board, the combination of brains all together focused on a single issue is so powerful. And so often it's wasted. So often the boards are really just reading materials and approving financials and doing very, very tactical kinds of things, when really the beauty of a good board is to be strategic. And I can't tell you how frustrated I am because the change in boards has been so slow. But I have had the privilege of working with a number of boards that have made huge differences. Maybe I'll give you one example. I'll do it really fast. We recruited a board for a company called Universal Technical Institute. They train mechanics, and the the board started brainstorming about who their customer is, and they had always considered that the mechanic students were the customer. The board suggested, let's look at the car company as the customer. And that really revolutionized that company, because then they got training, they got investment, they got all kinds of equipment, and they got their students hired. So, one idea from a director thinking, and this was a collegial suggestion, it really makes a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move over to, because I want to make sure I got a couple hands up here. Excuse me, Professor. We'll move over here to Christopher. You had a question?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to all the authors. Did any of you have rejection with your book premise? And if so, from whom rejected your thought before you published your first book?
Who wants to take that?
Well, I was really lucky and just sailed through with the best of the best. I didn't realize how lucky I was, because it's very unusual.
Did anyone have a rejection? And just looking, I don't see anyone.
I did not have a rejection. I had working with my publisher to reshape my book.
Okay.
And we had many, many conversations. For each chapter I would submit, we would have a meeting about it. And I remember my first chapter, it was something like 10,000 words. And he's like, Luiza, this is not the book we agreed to. This is, think, busy business leader on the back of a plane, flipping through your book. We need, nuggets and tips. So he kept cutting and cutting and cutting. So from 10,000 to, he gave me a limit, 2,000 words per chapter. I went a little, more than that, but in my defense, then I now feel I have 2 other books, somewhere that I could write.
Repurpose.
It's all written. It's just, he kept cutting and cutting to the right audience, busy business leaders.
Thank you. I see Dana's. Did that answer your question, Christopher?
Can I add something? Today, so many people are self-publishing because of social media. And so they're self-publishing online. So the market is really changing.
That's what I was going to ask. I didn't go through the classical publishing media, and I just went for it and did, with the help of an editor, with the help of professionals that are working with these big publishing houses, which makes the book a very highly professional. But because my audience is such a niche, I decided not to go that path. And so there was no, because it just made it happen. And then that maybe it will change. Maybe if the book finds, a broader audience, then you can maybe take it to the publishing house. But yeah, so that's my experience.
Thank you. I see Dana's hand's been up for a little while. So Dana, you've got the floor now.
Sure. Again, thank you to Gloria. I always enjoy these author series. I had a couple questions, one particularly for Susan and one for Stefanie. So Susan, in terms of boards, oftentimes, I'm sure several of us are approached about being on various boards if we're not already on one or running one. What are some things that we should take in consideration when asked to be a part of a board?
Well, you want to be sure first that you trust the management and like the management and how the companies run. And if you're not comfortable with the CEO and the team, no matter what the business is, no matter how much money they're offering, I wouldn't go forward. Another thing is to Gosh, I lost my thought. What did you say?
You were just sharing with us some things to consider when asked to be on the board.
Yeah.
Integrity is important.
The other thing is if it's, so many people so want to be on a board, they'll accept the first offer that is made to them. And I really suggest not to do that because you're going to spend, if it's a decent board, you're going to spend over 200 hours a year on that board, and there's always a crisis. So there'll always be an extra amount of time. So it needs to be a business that you understand or can learn to understand and that you care about. And then you need to like the other directors. So I think it's really important to talk to the other directors and find out what their experience is.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm sure I'll have more questions that I maybe visit offline on LinkedIn.
Be glad to.
Are there
Stephanie,
any other questions from the floor?
I had a part 2 for Stephanie, if that's okay.
Okay, part 2, go.
Part 2 is for you, Stephanie. I just happen to have your book here. One of them. I actually have both of them. But there's 2 sections in this book that kind of jumped out to me, namely the one that says, "Are you teachable?" And then I think about that and the work arena, in the business arena. What's the importance of being teachable, and how does that nugget? I can tell you how it impacted me, but what's the importance of being teachable when you wrote this? And then the other piece of that is the section 16 that said even Jesus needed to be encouraged. And as leaders, I found that pretty relevant too, because we're ones that build, give out, and then oftentimes you're not going to be acknowledged or encouraged. So I just want to thank you for that piece for me.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing some of the chapters that resonated with you so well. So when writing Are You Teachable, there are times that we're not open to suggestions or recommendations, or we come with our own preconceived ideas. And as I study and pray, that it applies not only to work, but it also applies to your spiritual life. And in order to be teachable, you have to be willing to serve, you have to be willing to be submissive, and you have to be willing to hear. And you have to be willing to hear God's voice. You have to be willing to serve other people. You have to be willing to submit to God. And that's applicable to work. Because many times we go in with our own preconceived notions and idea, and we haven't really stepped back to see what is required and what is needed, and be able to really take observe the lay of the land. So you have to be willing to be teachable, willing to, even though you might think you have the answers, allow someone else to provide another option, because that to get to the finish line, you can get to the finish line in several directions. It's not just a straight shot.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the floor?
Could I add one comment to Dana's answer? I think maybe the most important thing is to find out whether the board is valued by management and can make a difference.
Awesome. That was my second part, but I didn't want to take over time.
I know, I don't want to talk too much.
I'm going to throw one out for me. As I listen to you share your inspiration and your best takeaways from the book, there's such a learning tool going on here, just a learning experience. How many of you have or considered a workbook to accompany your book? Because that would be a way of diving deeper into your information.
Well, funny that you mentioned that. I do have a workbook that I co-authored with Christopher Herring for My Will, His Will, and it's a 30-day challenge, and it's great for small groups. And so it does a deeper dive. I think it's a great team building exercise if we want to do, well, there's a small group for women or a small group for friends or family members, or even for the family. We have a great workbook that we've created for My Will, His Will, and it's called the My Will, His Will Take the Challenge workbook to go with the actual book itself. So
I asked that because I absolutely cannot read a book without a highlighter. I
Oh,
don't have a highlighter, I can't read because I have to grab that. And I also have something to write on, a little spiral notebook because I want to expand on. I might have read something, but my mind expanded on it. And I didn't want to lose what that was because later you go, oh my God, what was that? I had the greatest thought and it's gone. I think the next question I'm just to throw out there is going over to Luiza on just why do we need to pay attention? Of course, this is a no-brainer, but tell us again why we need to pay attention to cultural differences. Because
Yes,
that's
I'll answer that, but I'll also go back and talk about the workbook. The book is now becoming a digital course. So we will have a workbook to go with each of the modules. But as far as why pay attention to cultural differences, when you look at our society today, there are so many factors that are really impacting what is happening in the workplace. Look at, demographic changes. We are, by 2045, we're going to be white, so we are minority in this country. Look at increased immigration. We don't have to go overseas to talk to someone from another culture. Every year, according to the statistics, we are seeing an increasing number of immigrants coming to this country. And just between 2018 and 2019, there was an 11% increase. So those are individuals that are now, we will likely be, sharing a sandwich on the break room. And also there's globalization, there's, in the past, most businesses worked within US borders or within their own borders. But now, globalization is bringing people from all over the world together. Couple that with, the technology that we have today. In fact, just the other day I was having a meeting. I'm here in Minnesota. The other one is in southern Minnesota. The other partner is in Brazil. So technology is bringing people from all over the world together. So today, chances are you're going to be working with, supervising, being supervised, or doing business or collaborating with someone across the globe. So we need to understand these differences so that we can work well across those differences.
I have a question to you, Luiza, if you don't mind, Gloria. I'm working right now, potentially with a Brazilian company, quite large. And when I'm finding out, we all know that time is an issue, that Brazilian companies act and move very slowly. But what I'm finding out is that the element called aversion to risk and fear seems to be quite magnified in Brazilian companies. Any comments from you on this topic?
In fact, I have, this is one of the chapters that I covered in the book. There's an entire chapter about that. We could speak for hours on this chapter, but if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can, I can share.
Oh, I'll be delighted.
Additional ideas with you. So please do that.
I'll be delighted.
I'll share some thoughts with you, because otherwise we're going to be here, for a while. And being a polychronic, that's no problem. We were going to stay, in my lectures, I always go, over. So, but I don't want to do that. So I'll look forward to receiving a message from you, and then we can chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa, so much. And thank you for your book.
And thank you, everyone. I mean, this has been a thrill for me just to put together. And the more I email you and dialogue with you, the more I feel like I'm getting to know you. So I feel like I've got more friends, that my friendships are expanding in this author community. But this time I'm going to do a call on somebody. I'm calling on Dwane. Dwane will be our moderator for May. And I can't think of anyone better to share what May is going to be all about than the moderator himself. Dwane, you're on.
Well, we're going to get into some of the technical pieces here of the issue of intellectual property, how you work with editors, some of the issues of landing pages and kind of e-cards, and how you do connecting and building your network. And it's going to get into the real managing the part of the business side of this publishing world. So that's our topic for next month.
And our lineup is?
We have Flavia Campbell, Gwen Nichols, and Tal Zilberberg. And we may have a couple of others joining us at this point, but we're still waiting to get that confirmed.
Yeah, and I'd like to call on Christopher. Where are you? I seriously would like you to think about participating in this one based on what Dane, or I think it was somebody, Stefanie, I think Stefanie, or was it Dana? I can't remember, but somebody shared some amazing things about you and how you got their book going. Maybe it's Stefanie, was that you?
It was actually probably Elise, Dana, and myself.
Elise, okay,
all,
all right.
all three of us.
Okay, it's still there. I just couldn't pull from my head who it was. But where is Christopher still here? Are you
Is
here?
he still there? Let's see. Where did Mr. Herring go?
Stefanie, work on him for me.
I will. I
Because
will.
Dwayne, I think he'd be a great addition to your lineup.
Okay.
Sounds terrific. That'd be
Okay.
terrific. And I just tell you, I just loved today. So thank you all very much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Yeah, and Doug, are you still there?
He's saving the dog.
Oh, that's right. He's walking the dog. Anyone else have any questions? We have about 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
This has been great. There he is. Okay, Doug, you're on. You close us out.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
can hear
great.
you.
Okay, super. No, I'll second Dwayne's comments. This was really inspirational. You know, when the speakers, all of you, when you went around the room talking about what inspired you, that was like, I mean, I was already standing up with the dog, but if I was sitting down, I would have stood up because it was really like, wow. And, you know, the fact that it inspired a couple book ideas for Professor Ancis, I think is probably very similar to the reaction that all of us got was, wow, that's amazing. And we all can do that too. So Gloria, thank you so much for putting all of this together. All of these, we take away great nuggets, and today's was very special. Thank you all.
Yeah, and today we have chocolate nuggets from Stefanie. I like it. Chocolate spiritual nuggets. I love spiritual stuff. I'm all about it. So now I get to put the chocolate on it.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Or good morning, whichever the case may be.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.